Hello everybody. So today we're going to be doing a bit of a react video because I think it is important to look at critics, to look at potential criticism. And it's unlikely that you receive criticism if you're broadcasting often to communities that already somewhat agree with you. But there's a lot of people who are new to the idea of voluntarism and statism who ask really good questions. And I found this video from literally 10 years ago, which I thought, just watching a little bit of it, was like, wow, this is some pretty good questions, some really good examples of things that I hear and concerns that people have, which I cannot blame them for, right? I cannot blame anybody. I've had a lot of concerns over any ideology or worldview in particular. And I say any because, I come at it from a very spiritual, psychological perspective, which I'm going to be providing as a critique of some of the comments that are shared here. Because I look at things deeper and I don't identify as a voluntarist. You may see at certain times within my videos I use the word anarchism or voluntarism, but in truth, I'm just myself, and in many of my bios I just say no title. Sometimes I use the word abolitionist because I looked at the history of that, and that also gave me further insight so I can share about that too. But I don't want to go into too much of a rant because, as you can see, this video is about 50 minutes long. I probably won't even go through the whole video. And if I have to, I'll record different parts. Like I'll record again, I'll make this a part 2 or something. But either way, if you're not somebody who wants to listen to this or watch this video, a good resource I would recommend regarding the critiques on voluntarism and the idea of a free world, you can read this book called What Anarchy Isn't by Larkin Rose. And I think that is like a very easy to read, like it's a short picture book that anybody can read and understand that goes over the most basic concerns. And of course, the longer version of that would be his book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. And a good primer to get anybody involved into these ideas that there is a superstition that has long existed, that government, this belief in authority, is actually the root cause problem to all the evil in our world, would be the Jones Plantation movie. Or even Mark Passio's Natural Law Seminar, where he comes at it from a different angle. But both Larkin and Mark have approaches that I tend to say, hey guys, look at Larkin or Mark, because they hit on some things that a lot of other people don't necessarily hit on. For instance, the morality and the psychology. And so you're going to see that as part of my critique, not to, give some foreshadowing, but it's the reason why I think I haven't had to make a video like this, but I just feel like making a video like this. It's because people who come to my content and they see where I'm coming from, they see the historical background, the psychology, it's stuff that I'm not talking about economics. I'm not talking about all the logistics of how a certain world would work. I mean, people could have asked the abolitionists the same exact thing. How would the world work without slavery? And this is the way we've been doing things, and it's insane to think otherwise. So it'll be interesting to see because, of course, in this video, again, 10 years ago, Stefan Molyneux, who's somebody I actually quote a little bit in my Slavery Gone for Good book, is somebody who is a voluntarist, but he also uses the term anarcho-capitalist. And these terms tend to coincide, but not necessarily, right? Because if you go back in history with the abolitionist, and I did my video on like, what if somebody hoards a bunch of resources? I probably could expand on that, frankly. I can see the value in all the different isms and ologies and why they were created. And oftentimes, as you look through history, words can change quite a bit, not just among translations and languages, but words themselves. Ideas and thoughts and philosophies, just like languages, can be perceived and used differently in a myriad of ways. And I think this actually only further supports voluntarism, but I'll get into what I mean by that through the critique. But basically, some of that video is like, if you have a complaint and you disagree with somebody's worldview, it's partly the whole reason why voluntarism exists. Because nobody is really all going to agree on the same thing at the end of the day. And we have to respect each other's free ability to live our own lives. And we have to encourage that ability, and that requires education. So I talk about this in a lot of interviews, but I want to give an example of somebody directly critiquing, Stefan Molyneux, who's making arguments using primarily economics and arguments of saying this is what the world looks like. And he's falling into that trap. and similarly the person who is critiquing. Okay, so all respect to you, good sir, who's critiquing. All respect to Stefan Molyneux. I respect both of you guys and your work, and everybody out there who's watching from wherever perspective you come from. Again, I don't want to really identify with any ology or ism. I want to look at the human cause behind this and see the value in all the different things that have been created, because democracy, republics, some of these have had good intent, bad intent throughout history, people trying to find ways to live life better. And so I look at things from, at least I try to look at things from a big picture, open-minded, and so I hope that you can do the same. So let us begin here.
All right, well, this ought to be about forever in length, something like that. Took notes when I watched this the other day, but I don't know if there's much point. So in overview,
he's doing what I'm doing.
He doesn't really believe any of this anarchy crap he talks is ever going to happen, or this free market capitalism.
I do want to say Stefan Molyneux wrote 3 really in-depth books: Everyday Anarchy, Practical Anarchy, and I don't know if there's a third one, what the name is, but I do have them on the liberator.us/resources, because I thought they were very insightful, and he uses a lot of analogies and a lot of ways of breaking it down. I think it's important people just become aware of that. I mean, he spent a great amount of time creating that material, and many people who are new to the idea of voluntarism, Stefan, opened it up to them, opened up a whole new avenue. So kudos to just simply sharing a new point of view, right? Whether you agree with him or not.
Crap, he knows it's never going to happen, so he talks this shit just because it's anti-government, and anti-government usually means, attack the social elements of government get attacked first, and so he just assumes that all the anti-government people will attack the welfare sluts because they're causing all the trouble.
Yeah, there's a lot of egos that can get involved in unconscious egos that can happen within any community of thought, especially regarding world affairs and how people should act and what is right and wrong. For sure. I mean, wars have been fought over that matter, right? So we have to try to end all that ego justification.
And again, in his system, he talks with such hypocrisy. One minute he concedes that, it's the reason why government sucks is because basically people suck. So he concedes the point that people are selfish and greedy, and they cut corners and cheat people and will fuck people over. And yet he believes in his utopia, where there is no public education, where the poor are left where they were 300 years ago, which is on the street. That somehow all those little, widow orphs are somehow going to grow up with character. It's just a...
I just want you to notice the language here, okay? His utopia, okay? Assuming it's something that he created as an idea of what society is. And this idea of utopia, of course, and again, I used the slave abolitionists before, not necessarily meaning that it is fantasy or can't be possible. But usually that is what is inferred by the use of the term utopia. And by the way, I don't mind this direct approach. I think, I respect it, frankly, because it's just more human. So I don't mind him cursing and all that jazz.
Orphs are somehow going to grow up with character.
Yes, somehow going to grow up with character. Somehow. What's going on here, right? Is there a missing link here that we're not seeing? How do we see that someone has moral character? Does that have any relationship with freedom, right? Mark Pasho, of course, would say, absolutely it does. That is the solution, is teaching morality, and morality equals freedom, right? So he tries to make that as direct as possible. That's going to be insightful as we move forward.
It's just, and everybody's going to love each other and be nice to each other. Nobody's going to offend each other, really piss each other off. They're not going to step close enough to somebody's perception of their rights to earn retaliation.
No, all that, of course, would still happen. That's just reality. I think we can all agree on that, there's always going to be bad people and people who overstep and don't care about the idea of rights and natural law and voluntarism. This is something we have to understand is reality, right? And there's still people who practice slavery today. There's still people who do all sorts of horrid things that the majority of people, however, would consider wrong and not to do. And there's a whole education system, like in our schools, built around the idea that slavery is wrong, we should not repeat history. Okay, so it's now like ingrained within the culture, and now it's become a norm. Okay.
And he's all for retaliation. And he's all for, it's coming right for us, shoot it. He's all for the South Park joke. He's all for, it's a black guy, shoot it. That's all this shit is. And his DROs would just end up being mobs. So it would just bring back the mafia in the biggest way, right? And absolutely nothing to stop it. So the mafia has no government meddling with it. What do you think the mafia would do?
Well, it's interesting. This is being said as well, considering the fact you look at people like Murray Rothbard and some of the anarcho-capitalists, and their point of view is that a lot of these gangs and corporations, they have monopolies and they take over because of government assistance. Okay, but let's take that out of the picture in case we aren't to consider that point of view, although it's worth considering, I would say. The fact that, you have people in economics that actually support freedom, I think that's incredible. Regardless, it's very interesting to see, because what's the greatest mafia of all, right, is the government, we may say. And so, it's not necessarily about getting rid of all mobs and pretending like that wouldn't exist, but rather reducing the harm on the aggregate. And in particular, I talk about democide, the top cause of unnatural death. There's still going to be unnatural death. And I warn about technology as being like a second government, something to worry about, kind of separate from the government in many ways. There's still going to be many concerns that people have. It's about the education and then sharing on a mass scale, and then the mass actions of what is being committed and condoned. And, everybody believes in government. Everybody believes in that authority. And that authority is seen different than a mafia or a gang, which everybody perceives as immoral. The gang called government, everybody says it's moral, and they justify it through a bunch of different terms like law and legal, which makes something that is bad seem as if it is good and actually even necessary, a moral and right. So it can totally twist things on its head merely through perception. Whereas at least the mafia and the gang, they're honest and they're blunt, right? The criminal, they're blunt, they just do it. But once they start getting manipulative, they start becoming a psychopath, they start becoming a sociopath. Now they want political seats in power, or ways in which the subject complies, maybe even without force and violence. So that way they can do their crimes very effortlessly, as if it is sort of building our own natural reality around an unnatural idea, therefore creating an illusion, right? To where then you don't know that you're in an illusion. So then you have to really unravel it as the subject. It's like, where am I? Oh, shoot, I'm mentally enslaved, the worst form of slavery, right?
Right? I mean, it'd be whack, 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 whack. All over the place. Everybody'd be sabotaging each other's water. They'd be doing all kinds of dirty tricks to put another guy out of business. If somebody's ruining your business, you're not going to sit there and play fair.
And to be fair, this is also all speculation upon, I don't know what we're getting at specifically, so we have to get some context. I'll let him go on.
You're going to burn his building down. Some asshole, well, you can go down the list, all this stuff. This is innate.
It definitely makes people more aware as well, by the way. If anything happens, there's more direct responsibility. You can't just pass it off and say, oh, I'm going to give it to the government or these certain set of people, even though, of course, there'll be many different people looking to help others, because there'll be competition. You can say this is where the free market comes in. So there'll be a lot more people paying attention and a lot less externalization, much more taking control of oneself. And again, that's how you get to the point of freedom to begin with. That's a very important precept, is like people are looking all the way down here, but in order to get down there, there's a requirement. And that requirement changes the perception of what's down here. Okay, because morality, if it's required for freedom, means that when you have freedom, people are going to be more moral. And it's because you need morality for freedom. Otherwise, by definition, you're not free. So you've got to see these as interlinked, and therefore, you can keep that freedom through the education, through the generations, and maintaining who you are. Like, again, I give the example of slavery.
Silly nonsense. And it becomes obvious, in his next video. I'll try to get both of them in here, but it's an awful lot. But this really, his answers are so trite and silly as responses to these hard questions, and he just fluffs them off, and with simplistic drivel that would have that means absolutely nothing as policy. So again, these are real arguments to have, right? Fundamentally, we would agree. Corruption in the banking industry is bad. Let's fix it, okay? The military-industrial complex is bad. Let's fix it, okay?
Yep.
He wouldn't want to fix wealth disparity because somehow he thinks there's...
But, this idea, let's fix it, right? What does that mean? How do we do that, right? Just the questions to ask from that point.
Entitlement in birthright, so we fundamentally disagree on that one.
What is it?
So we fundamentally... he wouldn't want to fix wealth disparity because somehow he thinks there's entitlement in birthright. So we fundamentally disagree on that one.
Okay. I'll just let him...
I would argue that there might be some argument to be made about somebody's right to be rich, but not their right to make it in perpetuity, to create a dynasty. That I don't believe. That cheat just breaks the invisible hand altogether. And for him not to be able to admit that is bogus. Incredibly bogus.
I do have to say, again, I'm not sure exactly what point he's getting at, but people in economics, anarcho-capitalists, or anybody who's saying like free market will solve all our problems, you're kind of fooling yourself. It's along the lines, again, of a spiritual point of view, of being humble and saying, I don't know everything. Because there's many problems that can happen that you don't perceive. Just as the people on the other end, there's many solutions that people don't see that wouldn't be mentioned. That's why it's very important to get rid of the ego here, because there are things in myself, in my own arguments, I may not see. And you watching the video, coming to, like, oh yeah, he's right. Oh yeah, he's right. And, your own conclusions, things that you don't see. And we have to kind of reflect on ourselves with a truly uncarved block point of view to really get in touch with, like, what is this reality? And what is this reality, right? Anarchy and Larkin Rose's point of view is just reality. It's not a political view of the world, a certain model, right, that we form humans into. And this, again, coincides with the Taoist point of view. It's like nature is spontaneous, nature is order, it's not chaos. People think of it as such, but where's the evidence, right? Because if the chaos is naturally there, right, chaos is just already part of it, are you going to fear it? Are you going to say, oh, we shouldn't have that fear and create a bunch of, you shouldn't have that bad thing in the world and create a bunch of pretension and ritual around it? The solution can be worse than the problem. And this also relates to Stoicism, being able to accept the unknown, being able to accept the evils, to become stronger, because you accept those evils that you cannot avoid. They're part of life. Like there's poisonous plants, right? I give this example in naturosophy with as regards to the appeal to nature fallacy and people saying nature is bad. Well, it's like if it's natural because it's inherent, it's always going to exist, what needs to then change is you and your perception, your ability to handle that scenario. You can't just blame nature. Because if you start blaming nature, then you may justify destroying nature. But instead, if you say, okay, this problem exists, let's work with nature, then maybe we can have a different outlook on things, right? So just some questions, some thoughts, reflections.
You know, you can't be talking about no fair game in those circumstances. But what? So let's go down. He has the on this video he has them time coded, but we'll see if we even bother. We might just skip, but we'll see how it goes. So we'll go to the first time code, right? Why not?
Try to get to them. So, Thomas asks a question, how would a free society prevent slavery? So a free society, for those not in the know, is a society without a government, where there is spontaneous self-organization, a voluntarist society. You could call it an anarcho-capitalist society, but it's a society without a government. So how would a free society prevent slavery? Well, slavery is a manifestation of the state.
Okay, so this is the silliest part, right?
So technically, I would fundamentally agree, but also disagree with that. And, you know, that's a very short slip of the tongue. Maybe he expands on that. I talk about in my book, Slavery Gone for Good, of course, the relationship between government and slavery a lot, and going through history and even showing evidence that slavery in its totality would not exist if it wasn't for the government. So there is evidence among those lines. But again, there's always going to be slavery and wrongdoing in a free world. The question is the aggregation, the permissibility. So governments tend to permiss slavery. Well, that's what they do, at least every one I've seen in history, right? So I say tend, I mean they always do. It's a collective form of imposing will on another, having a jailing system, having a tax system, taking people's labor. It's claiming ownership over people and their property. It is and has always been, based on my studies, slavery, right? So that's the point of view. And then, of course, yes, it gives rise to these other forms of slavery. So I can see the point of view that Stefan is bringing up here, but we cannot ignore the fact that it would still exist in small amounts in parts of the world.
Slavery is a manifestation of the state. And he does this in the following video. He calls Abraham Lincoln a fascist. So he argues that you don't have a right to impose force, and yet he's defending the South right to forcibly keep slaves.
Yeah, and it's difficult if you start siding with people in history who have lost merely because they lost or because it was a form of retaliation on a collective basis. It's like, how could you tell the retaliation on a collective level? This is where self-defense can get very tricky, and the abolitionists started to see this too, which is why many of them were pacifists, including Tolstoy, who, you know, again, wrote a similar work to mine, probably the closest thing to it, but a Christian pacifist nonetheless, who studied the abolitionists. And actually, I think even corresponded with one of them at a certain point in time, but the point is that violence, you know, seen directly one against another person who's just living their life, it's like, yeah, that's bad. That person should defend themselves. But when you have like crowds of people, oh, he did it. No, he did it. Oh, well, I'm justified. No, I'm justified. It starts to get really tricky, which, by the way, is why content creators have to be very careful in regards to this topic, because audiences and collectives and masses have their own psychology. Something we detail on healthrevealed.org. I mean, the idea of a mass formation, mass psychosis, mass hysteria, and even just the nature of crowds, what they call crowd psychology. This can take place even without an authority figure, okay? Where crowds get together and people think something just because someone else thinks the same, right? And there's some sort of insecurity within themselves. Like, these things are always going to exist. Taking that into account, adding in the superstition of statism and the belief in authority, now it gets a little bit more complicated, doesn't it? Right? Which is why we have to break it down. And I try to, at least, you know, with a lot of my works, but looking at authority, I can just say, hey, this belief in authority does a lot of harm, because somebody could be insecure, they could be following the crowd, they usually receive their own karma, right? And at the end of the day, karma comes one way or another to all these systems of evil. and to all beings that are out of harmony with nature and natural law or just truth, right? One way or another, as we learn through time. But it can seem difficult, when we start really getting down to the itty gritty and we ask, what about this scenario, that scenario? And so it's an interesting way of looking at things, because in a way, collectivism, individualism, is like you can't separate the two. People like to also associate with these terms, right? So for instance, oh, well, yeah, I want the individual to be respected and their rights, so everybody should be an individualist. Oh, that's kind of a collectivist way of thinking about individualism, right? Because you want everybody to think a certain way. And it's like, oh, well, you're also utilitarian, because although you're focused on the means, you're not thinking about, the means for an end, you do want to reach a certain end even still. So, I mean, it's a lot of these weird contradictions that can happen where people are doing the very thing that they speak up against. Just something to bear in mind.
Violently extort them into their servitude. And he's defending it. He's defending it as if they can't be touched by another group of individuals who find that force obnoxious. And so here's this hypocrisy showing already.
Yeah, I don't know. He's referencing something that is separate from the video he just showed, so I'm not sure.
He's making this ludicrous, well, I'll let him make the argument, but it's a silly argument.
And it's like saying, how would a free society prevent the DMV or the Department of Education? Well, it would not be part of that society.
Well, just even imagine that, though, right? The DMV. So in his society,
again, notice the language, right? His society. Not taking into account that naturally there is no DMV. Naturally there aren't these systems. Doesn't mean there won't be people who set up those systems, right? But there is a presumption on part of necessity that people make in regards to anything, invention-wise, even as simple as a fridge, where in some parts of the world they don't need fridges because you don't need to refrigerate a whole lot of things. People on part and necessity say, oh, well, what would imagine? I mean, the food would go bad. So just something to bear in mind, because there will be people who fulfill the roles that they see need to be fulfilled. That's the whole idea of a market, right? Is, oh, you have something? Oh, wait, I don't have something. I got to create that thing because that thing is going to make me successful. Oh, man, people don't like it. Well, now I'm not going to be successful, right? And there's going to be competition. There's going to be tension. That's amazing, though, because it's kind of just how, like, you can say survival of the fittest. It's kind of built into nature, right? It's not a bad thing. It's not something we should fear. It's something we should learn from. Now, even if we do see bad things within it, then again, we raise awareness of it. We're literally engaging with the free market of ideas, just not in the lens of products. Simply by saying, hey, what that person is doing with their product is wrong. Or, they're crowding out this person who is trying to share their product. So now we got to bring awareness to that, right? But at no point does the individuals who are the business owners or the people selling a product who's trying to be business owners have to impose violence. Would you say that they should? Because that would be my question for you. Is there a point in which you say violence is necessary? You say, oh, well, I feel like I'm being pressured, so I feel like I'm justified to use violence against them. Are we now letting our emotions get the best of us to now where we feel like we should violate somebody's own individuality? This is why people set up a concept such as rights. It's like, here are the limits by which human behavior is set at. Now, again, people are going to try to do what they do, but notice people's reactions. People are not dumb. Most people know violence is wrong. Well, why is that? Most people know slavery is wrong. Well, why is that? Okay, now I'm not appealing to popularity. What I'm doing here is I believe in intelligence. I believe in people over time learning from behavior and relatively knowing the effects of their actions. Okay? And it just so happens a lot of people know that because a lot of people experience things. A lot of people have seen history. And the more that we can share that history which hasn't been taught, and the more psychology hasn't been taught, and people know that on a mass scale, that could be quite powerful information. But also, again, the flip side to that is the information can cause more problems, more debates like this, in regards to the complexities of it, unable to settle back down into the humble mind. And so that can create problems of its own, right? Again, being able to sift through all of it is partly the reason why we can't impose our will and say this is what we have to do on everybody. Because there's so many ways to approach this life alone in thought, nonetheless in action and in products and in services and involving other people.
You'd have no division of motor vehicles. You'd have no obligations regarding the safety of the vehicle you were driving on the highway. So every time you went on the road, you'd be, if you ever put your kid in the car, somebody should smack you upside the head.
This is assuming that the other person doesn't also want to be safe. And why would they want to just go after you for no reason? And do they not think there wouldn't be any consequences for it? Would you not assume there wouldn't be any form of enforcement? And is there then a point of the Second Amendment, as we call it in America? Think about that, because that kind of just debunks the whole argument that he's making here. At least, again, in my view, and think for yourself, but makes it pretty clear to me that you empower the slave, you say, hey, you are free and we're going to help you become free, and then we're going to maintain your freedom. How are we going to maintain your freedom? By allowing you to defend yourself or have other people defend you. You're going to learn how to do so. It's a very empowering position. Not like, oh, well, these people are going to defend you, just leave it to them, right? Even though they're minutes away when things happen in seconds, right? So, and again, you may not like guns. Guns are a man-made invention. I'm not a huge fan of them either, right? But there is a level to which you need to understand these things exist, and you can't really take it out of existence, being that they exist, like AI and technology. It's about the conscious usage of them, which, how do you gain consciousness of it? Education. Well, look at many parts of the world where there's alcohol, right? And some people create alcohol prohibition, right? It's like, let's end alcohol drinking. But that there tends to be the most drinking problems in those places where they ban it. People are looking forward to the day they can drink so they can just go all out, and then it becomes this habit and they get stuck on it. Whereas at a very young age in certain countries, they're teaching their kid how to be responsible over it, and so it never corrupts them and maybe can even be healthy, right? It's like different points of view just open up our perception drastically.
Because you're putting your kid at huge risk, because you're letting any fuckwit drive any kind of fuckwitted vehicle without any licensing, anything.
That can happen now. And by the way, it does. As Plato said, good people don't need laws to act responsibly, and bad people find ways around the laws. If somebody wants to do something bad, they will find a way. And if they want to find a way to do something bad continually, they're going to create a system in place, one way or another, that allows them to do it continually, right? It's about determination. It's about change. The same way we make the world better or worse, it's like what you set your mind to, okay? So if we set everybody to the mindset of disempowerment and demotivation and saying they have to externalize their problems, we're going to yield that as the resultant condition, even if we say a bunch of justifications and many good things about it. So let's be aware of that.
Right? Does that make any sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me. Who wants to drive on a road where I can't be guaranteed some minimum of safety?
You can't be guaranteed any safety in this life, sorry to tell you. There's always going to be some sort of risk that you're accepting, and every day you're taking risks, right? The level to which you're taking that risk is going to differ upon many, many different factors, right? But are we to say then we have to license everybody and make everybody comply because of the possibility of a few people who might do some evil? And then again, with that process, take away the responsibility and the education that is involved to really nurture somebody into a good driver or a good drinker or a good anything in this life. There's many people concerned about the missing arts and the missing social sciences, and he mentioned that. Well, how is it that we've lost all that? Do we not think there's any part on which it is the system and not just us and human behavior and individuals? The same case of medicine. We can treat individuals all day, and we don't see that there's a system that's causing all those individual problems. So we end up with more problems because we're not fixing the aggregate root cause solution or problem.
Why would I I'll find another way to get there. Going by road would probably be the last way to go if you want to live.
Slavery.
I mean, he would let the drunks on the road, he'd let them all. Do whatever the fuck you want.
He would let him all. What's going on here? I mean, there's already a bunch of drunks on the road, and there'd be people who would be curious about it, right? And they want to help other people about the scenario. And now, you know, we have technology in many different ways to help so many of these scenarios, by the way. The funny thing to me is the extent to which people will go to justify violence, but will not admit to it.
Driver beware. That's his attitude. Somehow that's more civilized. That's the better world. The better world is to give people the liberty to recklessly run you the fuck over.
Driver beware, that means consciousness. And I see a sense of fear. Oh, well, this will happen. Oh my gosh, well, this will happen. Indeed. If you're living from a place of fear, will you ever truly be free? Right? It's like Mark Passio says, freedom includes infinite possibility, which includes the possibility of chaos. You fear the chaos within freedom, now you fear freedom. Right? So then, again, the question comes, well, is there then a middle ground? Like, can people, not be in that state of fear, but also, have some sense of security? They can do that in a free world. The idea of a middle ground, or as like a limited state or a balanced state, is like saying limited violence or limited authority, but you're still giving somebody authority, putting them in a position of inauthenticity, creating order followers, and allowing violence and therefore allowing it to grow. So that system of limitation will inevitably grow into a corrupt system you won't be able to handle, and it can grow even bigger than the one previously because it was permissed and allowed and was founded on a foundation of limited and all these people, like we the people, and we created it, and it's for peace and justice. And again, that's where more euphemisms come in, that's where more deception comes in, that's where more mental slavery comes in.
Recklessly. I mean, just without any kind of, just total disregard is win.
It is extremely expensive.
I imagine the speeders alone. Imagine the speed nuts flying down the road at 2 in the morning at 120 miles an hour.
Still happens.
And extremely inefficient.
So he's saying
and very dangerous to their own health, by the way.
That slavery is inefficient, which is just a huge lie, right? I mean, all you're doing is paying people.
Slavery can be really inefficient, which is why there's now these other forms that are, I'd say, more deceiving. And this is also where the term wage slavery came in. Again, different forms of anarchism, socialism, communism came in right after the 1800s for this reason, because it started to get very covert, and Marx and many of the writers at the time even said it, like, hey, this is like a kind of a hidden form of slavery. Okay, so again, be able to see all the sides here.
The minimum of their bare upkeep, giving them barely enough food, barely enough shelter, barely enough decency to live on, and you're extorting them with brutal extortion to be very productive, or else. If you're not productive, you're going to get hurt. Period.
Yeah, but because they don't want to work, like they have to be forced to work, there's a lot of resource involved for that, and they may not be as productive workers, right? So again, context as to why someone would make that claim and say slavery is less productive. But I'm sure it's productive in other ways. I mean, it's like, again, two different ways of doing things. There's going to be some benefits and some downsides in both cases, which is why anyone would ever justify it to begin with, right? Why it ever existed to begin with is because somebody held on to some good and ignored the bad that came with it. right? And so it then became a societal attachment as people were raised into it, and the children of slaves became automatic slaves, and everybody was trained into believing that slavery was normal.
He's saying that's not productive. People wouldn't do it if they could. I mean, it's a preposterous.
Okay, people wouldn't do it if they could. People wouldn't do it because they know it's wrong. I mean, would you say people are just all of a sudden like gonna start taking slaves in? No, I mean, I think our society overall on a general moral evolution basis is not going to do that. And you can say, hey, this is me just trusting in people. But I know a lot of people, and people just want to live their own lives in peace and happy and healthy. And all this social rights and social justice movements and people coming together and doing all sorts of things and churches and charities and organizations, they all exist because, you know, there is this idea of conscience and morality. And morality cannot be disregarded in these talks about freedom, ever.
A silly response.
You pay a person, that person is good, wants to do a good job, wants to advance, will bring their ideas to the job and so on.
Yeah, right. Cotton picking. I want to advance as a cotton picker. There's such advancement. It's just written all over the job. There's all kinds of advancement. I'm going to grow a third arm and pick even faster.
Okay, I don't know what
I'm going to advance into
point of this is.
It's just, anyway.
He's saying,
on.
like,
Trying to move on, move this up.
I mean, you know, if you're not a slave and you're free, you can move on and do better things and say, hey, maybe I'm going to start up my own cotton business, right? You can't do that if you're enslaved. There's a lot of limitation in regards to what you can do, and maybe you can invent a machine or a technology to make it better, you know, production-wise. But only the slave master can make that decision. If you're a slave on a plantation, you're not going to be an inventor.
It becomes unviable. How would a free society prevent itself from falling back into tyranny? I believe.
Yeah, so let's remember, too, the context here. Let's not forget the context. All the tyrants and monarchies of old were all created by a free market. The free market creates dynasty. It creates...
And by the way, that is correct. In a disregard to morality and spirituality and psychology as we evolve and learn from behavior. The free market is just, again, if we're saying anarchy and free markets are just baseline reality, then it just is, right? And anything that comes from that, I did a video a while back, which is that, and it's some other people who were voluntarists did great videos on this, saying that government is conceived in anarchy because there's no ruler above the government, nobody to limit the government. The government is the highest, right? So they live in anarchy, but they rule over us. And so it's a very interesting idea, which is also why you can say the kings and queens, they call themselves sovereigns. But of course, when we say we are sovereigns, we're implying that we are free and not beholden to them. There's no ruler above us. It's a ruler of the self. It's literally what the word superregnum means, sovereign. So, in summary, it's quite an interesting point of view here, because let's just get some recap here.
All created by a free market.
Oh yeah, the fact that anarchy, or a free market can give rise to government. That, yeah, absolutely gives rise to anything, to all sorts of possibilities. That possibility is limited by the culture and the ideas of the morality and the psychology of what people choose to permit through the education, through their minds, right? So, it seems like that's being forgotten here.
The free market creates dynasty. It creates power, creates consolidation, creates kings.
Can.
That's what it creates.
It can. It's possible.
That's what the free market
It doesn't guarantee, right? And you can say it guarantees because it has and it will in different forms, but also with the other parts, which means that it kind of negates the fact, because if it was only causing one thing, they would say, yes, that's what it's causing, but it's clearly causing like anything. So it's really null and void as an argument.
To consolidation of wealth and nation status, in the sense that you owned everything and you rented it all to the serfs. That's where the free market went the first time we tried it.
Yeah, but context again is because there was violence imposed on people, and can you say then it's a free market for the people who are being imposed upon? Not necessarily, right? So it's like the free market turned into something that negated the free market. You can make that sort of case, right? But remember the ideal, right? There's the ideal, and goes back to like idealism, Henry David Thoreau, and like the idea of utopia. Oscar Wilde called it the realization of progress and where humanity needs to go. There always needs to be an aim psychologically if people are going to want to better their lives and have something to live for, which by the way has many mental health benefits. I'd say quite the coincidence, but for good reason. Being able to have a higher purpose than yourself. You can call it God or nature, which is why people fight over it. It would seem counterintuitive for God to fight God, right? But it seems like that's what we've done in history, where we create systems that are man-made to support God, in return fight other people, although breaking our own teachings. There's a lot of contradictions throughout history for all sorts of things that people may associate as good. It doesn't mean you throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? There's ideals, and people don't always stick to those ideals, which is why people still teach those ideals. And again, the word teach, education is important. And if you see all teaching and all education as sort of as worthless and not important and no ideal, then where are we going? Is our fate going to be? Now, if you say that we should be present and should not have any sort of ideal or purpose, that works too in this favor of letting things be. So either way you look at it, it's supporting this idea.
Question once or twice before. To me, this is sort of like saying, how does the happiest married woman in the world prevent herself from filing for divorce?
So that's how it responds to the consolidation of wealth argument. That's somehow a response. Oh, I don't think it is.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of analogies because it brings in so many other things. So I try not to use them too much. Stefan's really good at it, and it makes really good arguments for books and for literature, and I see it a lot in philosophy. But I often question it because some people will say, oh, well, let's create a hypothetical. Let's create this imagined perspective. It's like, well, you just said it's imagined. You just said it's hypothetical. Why can't we deal with terms based in reality? I find that very interesting.
A question doesn't really make much sense.
Yeah, it does. Because your free markets will create people so preposterously wealthy, they will buy everyone out of their life and rent them a life. It's a fact.
So a free society comes about when...
I mean, can you draw a computer model? Can't one of you guys do like a Sims thing or something? Make a Monopoly board game, a free market?
Imagine trying to create a simulation of real life. Like, you got, like, World of Warcraft, Grand Theft Auto, Sims. I mean, barely touches the surface. Again, if we're claiming it's reality, it's not some projected model onto reality, which is, again, the very problem identified in Buddhism and Taoism and Eastern thought. It's something that you cannot conceive and perceive and even speak. Like, the Tao Te Ching says the Tao that can be named is not the eternal Tao. Try saying the nature of love, but also you would recognize that it's a very important thing. Just because you can't explain it does not mean it is not valid, or that it's not there. Right? And there's many things we are still trying to understand coming from a humble humility point of view, which allows us to learn as human beings so we can move forward in the first place.
And show me exactly how consolidation isn't the ending game. How something other than consolidation of wealth is what happens. Show me exactly what in your system, where the rich guy falls into the bear trap.
And we treat our children peacefully, and those children grow up with
no money, and you throw them on the street. There's no welfare, no public education, no free lunches at all, nothing for kids at all, no protections for children whatsoever. We go back to some voluntary charity day, which basically...
Voluntary charity... A lot of people help each other out, especially you see the storms and things that happen. Look how many people help each other out. The churches are constantly doing fundraisers, streamers, influencers doing fundraisers, helping out other people. What's the point of that? Again, what's the point of education and voluntary pursuits? Unless you're saying that the involuntary is so much grander and necessary that the voluntary pursuits just don't matter. Like, all their efforts are just not going to work as well. When you can literally combine the gross income of Walmart and Mr. Beast into literally own country, right? I mean, they have more power than the country because they're affecting people directly in their lives, right? Influencers and corporations, they have more power than the government, which is why the government needs to control them. And the government is just people who are just controlling other people, but people that are seen to have vested authority, which is what makes it all dangerous. Because then they can, interfere with people's businesses. It's like, where did you come from? Wait, you call yourself the government? You're allowed to just walk into my business, or allowed to just tell me what to do? Like the Amish farmers that were doing really good, that had to throw away thousands of dollars worth of products in America. I mean, they were doing really good business-wise because people wanted their product, but the government came in and took their product, right? And started messing with them because they have the authority to do so. And people believe so much in it that they justify it. All the order followers say, oh, well, I was just doing my job. Turning off their conscience, turning off their brain. They become the robots. They become the technocracy that they often may even oppose themselves.
Basically is back to the Dickens-esque reality that existed when people depended on voluntarism. It wasn't nearly enough.
What? When did people depend on voluntarism in whole, in a mass aggregate? Was that even known as a term? No. Right? And again, if referring to a previous time, likely had slavery, likely had many other evils that we gone away with. And why?
And what happens? The poor get sick because they're living in the slums, they're living in filth, and then you rich people do what? You burn them out of their houses when they catch a disease. I mean, that's another thing. In one of the videos he brings up, he talks about polio and smallpox.
And again, that's a moral issue.
Those two things would never have been eradicated in his world. In his world, there's no way to eradicate a disease.
That's an assumption.
Those diseases be alive and well in his anarchy.
Again, a lot of natural medicine is suppressed by powers that be, for the reason that healthier populace cannot be controlled. Right? A slave is one that doesn't have possessions, that isn't that healthy, so they're very easy to control. Not taught how to read, not taught how to write.
Yeah, in his non-federal world, the federal government eradicated those diseases. Not states, not municipalities.
You mean people who have solutions and share it, right? What is this idea that you call the government? What is that? Are you talking about the fact that some person was highly respected? Well, why were they respected? Was it because of their actions or because of what they're wearing and because of their title? Should people respect them because of their actions or because of what they actually have or because of some identity that people presume? There's a difference.
Municipalities, not localities. The only reason why those diseases aren't a threat to us anymore is because of federal investment in their destruction and annihilation.
Where does that money come from? It's coming from the people, right? And it's like, you break it all down, it's all just people. You say there's any good, comes from people. You say there's any bad, it comes from people, right?
By the time they're 18.
Illusion, the nature of illusion is very tricky to understand. So I understand these concerns. That's why I'm recording this video. And I'll probably be stopping it soon because this is quite a long video that I'm making.
But like 15 or 16 years of peaceful negotiation, they've never been hit, they've never been yelled at. They therefore are not going to be...
Again, what good would a vaccine be if you can't force people to take it? You can't understand that?
Become criminals or sociopaths.
Interesting. I mean, so now he's taken the case that there needs to be force used in that case, you know, to make people comply. Now, again, this is 10 years ago. Wonder if he changed his mind. But my goodness, forcing people to do something against their will with their own body. Yikes, that's not something I would want to do. So I would ask the question, would you do that in the case of relationships? Would you do that in other areas of your life? Well, what makes it right then in the case of politics and society? Do you just create this arbitrary exception because you choose that it's better? Again, people have different moralities and different worldviews, which is why I'm able to look beyond Mark Passio's material too. Right, so it's important to see that bigger picture, because when you do, you respect people. That's how we get to this point of view, is being able to have humility with each other. And again, this is like the prime teaching of Eastern philosophy. So we want to manifest that. Really have to tune into that, right? I'm going to end this soon.
To drink the blood of bunnies or anything like that, they're going...
Right, so again, his argument is, I will give them nothing, okay? I will give reckless reproducers nothing. I will not take care of their children. And somehow I believe their children will come out wonderfully.
Do you really think that that's what he wants?
And then the other extreme is you're going to have these elitists living on top of the hills, looking down at that world, and they're going to be growing up looking down at that world, and they're not going to be fucked up at all with their security guards with them all the time. Yeah, sure are. We've seen how mentally and psychologically healthy the spawn of the rich have been.
Absolutely, and that's because of the materialism, the consumerism. It's also another trap. It's another illusion. Okay, but comparing one illusion to the other, or one greater evil versus a lesser evil, again, requires some navigation. It's a very tricky road to follow. And if anybody has any questions, I'll try to answer in the chat. But I hope I provide a good summary. I guess I'll see what's the final statement here.
I mean, they've been absolutely crazy, actually. They've actually been cannibals. They've been all kinds of whack jobs.
So have people in poverty, however. It seems kind of strange to make a generalization of any group, presuming upon the fact that they just cannot have responsibility over merely what they have.
And they had every advantage.
Again, it's very disempowering. It's very attacking people who may have been successful for reasons that they provide a service or a product and got to that position because of it, right? And they may not accept that money. They may get that money, may not even live that life. It's their choice, right? So there's a lot of nuance, I'm going to end this here because we're reaching an hour. Let's look at some of the comments here. I love when Gary crushes Stefan Molyneux. Almost makes a few minutes of exposure to his droppings bearable. Quote from George Orwell, people can indulge in wild political views due to the secret belief that those views will never be tested against solid reality. Okay, well that can apply to many different things, right? Wild political views. Is this wild, or is this merely reality, right? And if we're taking it from the position of it is reality, then it's not a view, right? If we're taking the ego and the self out of it, the belief out of it, is it really, one? And besides, you can say anarchy is anti-political, not even political to begin with. Wild. Well, how wild is it? Simply because it's different from the current reality? Of course it would be perceived as wild. So, it's a good quote, but it can be perceived many different ways. And I think Orwell touches on some really important things I share in Health Revealed. the project. All the people that review Molyneux, this is the first one I've seen that cuts to the chase and just comes right out and shows Molyneux's arguments are plain nonsense, idiotic, and not to mention illogical. Not really an argument, though. These responses to Stefan are great. It's too bad he'll just pretend they don't exist. And yeah, I think an issue is many content creators aren't in touch with their audience necessarily, but I do see Stefan's constantly taking in callers and questions, I think, still to this day. There's a whole lot to respond to. Addressing DMV. Stefan of extortion. He simply thinks it won't happen. Deflect by saying the government extorts. Yeah, of course. Again, you cannot be in denial of the fact that, private individuals can still do wrongdoing and try to increase that wrongdoing. And not a mention here at all in the video or in the comment sections of statism and the superstition, which, by the way, is very usual among conversations of economics and people talking about potential ideals and worlds and views. When you take out this understanding of statism, you're going to be lost in the weeds, absolutely, because to me, that's like the root to what this premises of anarchism and voluntarism is all about. And this is how I got there, right? Because I'm a very moral person. I wouldn't want to do wrong to anybody. I've never done wrong in my life, frankly. Was raised with a very tight family. So, I see a lot of conservatives out there. I was a conservative. It's something that a lot of people, it's like, yeah, I want these values. I want to share these values. Well, how do you share those values? How you go about doing that can be more dangerous than actually the problem, right? It's like, we got to get strong borders because all these people are coming in. Like, careful now, right? What are you doing? Giving the state more power, but you say it wants less power. Well, you're saying it should have power here. Whoa, be careful here. And people just insulting Stefan for having a different point of view, which is very interesting, right? Because can we just have a conversation and share a different point of view? Something to bear in mind, because people may come to me with these concerns, and having to explain everything I said in this video can sometimes seem like a lot, even though sometimes what I'm saying is rather simplistic, right? So it depends on, I think, where individuals are currently at. But he's nuts. He sets himself up to be mocked. I mean, he's really just, sharing just ideas. He barely made a point across. I watched like 15 minutes of the video. Did he even play more than like a minute of Stefan? Ownership of land resources is clearly initiation of force. Just ownership of land, just having land, and this is a idea of property is theft. It's the idea. Peter Kropotkin. I'm very aware of these original texts in the 1800s, and I understand where they're coming from. I wouldn't say humans owned natural resources. I'd say it belongs to nature, right? But again, there is like, oh, well, what are you going to live on? And how are you going to have your own privacy? Is privacy a thing? Or are we going to say it's gone in the past because of technology, right? I mean, these are debates people will have no matter what, right? And that's fine. Again, statism, superstition, separate. Slavery, ownership of people, and that's where it gets where I'm really looking at. And land, resources, property is usually an extension of the person. So there has to be, again, humility and respect and learning, which is an art, it's a practice, it's an education. It's not one simple label or ideology. Like, this is the way things should work. Wishing up to Stefan, he's a complete narcissistic egoist. Can there be anything worse than a free market anarchy system? Wonder why he never talks about the Spanish model of anarchy, right? And of course, you can point out to many different, systems, say, well, look, it's tried here, it's tried here. They're not morally understanding these concepts. I would say almost none of them. It's like very recently we just respected like individual rights. It's like we're just coming to this understanding. It's not something that has existed, and many people have been talking about it. Like the Taoists are maybe some of the first, but in a whole different view than what anarchism and statism, and even Larkin Rose and Mark Passio doesn't even share that, right? Like I'm bringing that to the table a little bit, but my gosh, there's different ways to perceive it, different ways to go about it. And it's definitely something where, you know, there's evidence on both sides, just like anything else. Right? In science and medicine, you want to support something, there's tons of evidence over here. It's the internet. Yeah, Steph has changed his outlook since 2014. I mean, these comments 8 years ago. My goodness. Let's see if there's any new comments here. Let's do that. 1 year ago. He's literally the real Messiah. He probably hates being idolized. I hate it too, because if people were being idolized, yeah, that could be a problem too, is idolization. Even just for sharing these ideas, right? Don't idolize me. The whole point of my channel is not to idolize anybody, but also ideas, right? And extending that to other things. This quote was ahead of its time. Yep, this person saw it. Oh boy. All right. Yeah, see, look, but don't you have any doubts about your own worldview? Good question. Obviously, the answer is somewhere between. Yeah, it's very good to be able to look at things from a point of question and humility, regardless of where you stand on this, right? Beautiful stuff. Beautiful stuff. This is why I encourage people to simply stand on what they know fundamentally. You know, violence is wrong, and stand on that. If that's the case, how far are you willing to go with it? I'm going to put some questions on the screen at the end of this video, and you can think for yourself on that. And if I don't put them at the end of the video, I have a bunch of other videos too, but they just ask you basic moral questions. And if we can just stick on that foundation, people will come to the understanding of voluntarism. Look at Larkin Rose and his Candles in the Dark method of simply bringing awareness to people and what they think. It's really simple, actually, just as it was to say slavery was wrong, and it's simple to live without it, even though there was all these debates and all this stuff happening for many, many years. I mean, hundreds of years, some people were arguing they were the lone wolf out at times. But at the end of the day, there was a time where someone like William Lloyd Garrison said, we need to spread this to everyone. Let's make a newspaper. And then, boom, now there's a whole conversation around it, mass education about it, right? So this video, 51,000 views 10 years ago, may have been a lot for the time, but not a lot to really, you know, make a huge difference. Good to see some conversations arise about it. But again, where's the morality? Where is, you know, some of the foundations, I would say, to why people do what they do, their behavior, right? So thank you again to the person who made this video and to Stefan for sharing your perspectives. And thank you everybody for watching. Take care.